今天的单元我们要来分享比较感性的沟通风格，也就是 expressive 表现型。那要如何跟这些比较热心、有说服力、外向也比较情绪化的 expressive 来做沟通呢？ Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。 I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast。我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Today, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Where we've been focused on low responsiveness social styles, we're going to swap over to those high responsiveness social styles. Those styles who are more open with their emotion. You could say their heart is on their sleeve and you know what they're thinking before they say it. That same emotion can be incredibly inspiring. Today, we're going to talk about the high responsiveness, high assertiveness style, the expressive.
I'm so happy because we're talking about me today.
Which is an incredibly specific pointer towards expressive styles.
表现型，没错，我就是表现型的代表 which drives Nick nuts sometimes, but you know what, it's fine. 但是我们今天就要来聊一下，表现型的人呢，他们的一些特质是什么？还有，如果你的今天的对象就是这些 expressive 的话，我们要怎么样来做我们的简报、small talk， 还有会议的安排？
As a quick reminder, an expressive is someone who is high on responsiveness, meaning they're more open with their emotion, and they're high on assertiveness. They are more tell-oriented. The easiest way to spot an expressive is because they will be telling you everything they think as they are thinking it.
Yeah, 我觉得大概最典型的就是 expressive 的人，我们会一边想事情，我们会想一边讲。所以有的时候其实我们问了一个问题，我们可以 eventually 会自己回答自己的问题 because we're kind of like thinking through in our head.
So, an expressive is someone who thrives on personal influence and emotional bonding. What makes an expressive a great leader or a good communicator is an expressive of all the styles can be the most inspiring. Because they're the ones who are open with their emotion. If they're inspired, if they are motivated, if they are excited about something, they will let everyone know and they will try and bring everyone up at the same time.
I'm glad to say that. Do you feel inspired from me?
I can feel great inspiration from when you get things done.
Okay. But on the flip side, and I'm going to say this, on the flip side, when we feel low, and I think it's very easy for everyone else to tell.
Right. So at that same level of excitement and inspiration, when you're going down the roller coaster, you know, heading up the roller coaster, it's exciting, it's fun. But when you're headed down the roller coaster, everyone equally knows because an expressive will tell you, we're all doomed. We're not going to make it. How are we going to survive this? Key traits of an expressive, they really enjoy building bonds with other people. They like finding other people around them to talk to brainstorm with, and a lot of their way of getting results is through building relationships. Expressives are often the best networkers that you will find because they have no problem like going around and just building connections with a lot of different people. And usually, if they're in that very bright state of mind, people can be attracted to that. So they really will remember them. They will feel connected. They will feel, we talk about the reality distortion field that people like Steve Jobs or Bill Clinton, Obama have this ability, like when they walk in a room, to light it up. That tends to be an expressive's superpower.
我觉得刚刚一个 keyword 就是当 expressive 它真的是今天的 state of mind 是非常好的状态的时候，它真的可以 inspire 别人，然后在做 social like networking 的时候，它也是特别的强。I know I'm an expressive, but I definitely know a lot more expressive around me, and they're all really good at making friends and connecting with people, and they're awfully good at sales.
Yeah, they definitely know how to build relationships and then package other things to go through that. A key trait that we talk a lot about for an expressive is personal influence, which means they pride themselves on the ability to actually influence other people in that connection. They build relationships. They know how to leverage that relationship to benefit themselves, benefit the team or the company really well.
So let's say we're going to talk about the three big topics: presentation, small talk, and meeting planning. So I'm guessing that small talk is not really an issue with expressive, right?
Getting into small talk is not an issue with expressives. Expressives, again, they love building relationships. They're very good networkers. They know how to do small talk. But one of the things that if you are an expressive, you need to pay attention to is expressives will also start to dominate conversations. And in some cases, that can be okay. Maybe if there's a lot more introverted people or shy people in the group and they really need that person to like warm it up, bring everyone together. But left unchecked, an expressive will just completely dominate a conversation to the point that other people don't get a word in. And so expressives have to be careful that they're really good at breaking the ice. They're really good at getting things started, but they also need to watch whether other people are actually contributing or bringing something to the conversation.
所以当然我刚刚 Nick 有讲到，如果你今天是跟 expressive 做一个 small talk, starting the conversation 绝对不是一个问题。但我觉得啦，如果我今天不是 expressive, 对方是的话，你也可以就是让 expressive 多讲话 It's not a problem for them. 但如果转过来，我今天是 expressive，但对方不是的话，其实当 expressive 的人真的要比较小心一点。I think listening becomes really important， 而且你要非常的 intentionally to listen to people and actually listen for their emotion or key messages. Because a lot of times expressive will lose that opportunity because you're kind of in their head. 我觉得 expressive 比较会停留在自己的世界。
So another thing that happens when you're talking to an expressive in a small talk situation is you have to realize that they're speaking and thinking at the same time, which means their train of thought may kind of jump from topic to topic. A lot of times people feel like an expressive will contradict themselves in the middle of a message, and it's not purposeful. It's not like a expressive is trying to lie or to cover up something that they said, but they have a tendency to, while they're talking, to think about other possibilities, other ideas. So again, when left unchecked, it can be a really wild ride. There was a time where I was doing a project for the CEO of a major dental group in Taiwan. He was a very well-respected dentist, but he was like a super expressive. This man talks and thinks. And there was one time myself, the CEO, the COO, I think the COO's executive assistant, and we sat there for 10 minutes. No one else spoke. And the CEO talked about everything that he wanted. And about halfway through, when he was talking about what he wanted, he completely switched and talked himself out of everything that he had said in the previous 5 minutes. And so you could tell, like, everyone else, including his own team, is sitting there going, wait, I don't know what we're doing anymore. Because what you just said you wanted, you literally just talked yourself out of, and there was no input from anyone else in the room.
So would you say it's actually very useful if your boss or client or even colleagues are expressive? Is it useful to actually help the expressive to sum up some key points after they speak for that long?
Yeah, it can be. Or one of the most important partners of an expressive is an analytical. Because an analytical tends to be very good at keeping notes, keeping track of what was said. While an expressive is talking, they're actually not remembering what they're saying all the time. So oftentimes that they will turn to an analytical and be like, wait, what did we talk about yesterday? And then the analytical can be said, okay, this is what you want to do. This is what you want to do. This is what you want to do. And if they're on the same page, then that's a beautiful relationship.
Right. Now it comes to, let's say, presentation. If you're presenting to an expressive, and I'm guessing it's really different from presenting to a driver, what are the things we need to really watch out for?
Well, here's the interesting thing about presenting to an expressive. The presentation is not for them. Meaning, and that sounds weird, like, well, I have to present to them. It's like, in all honesty, they're not paying attention to your presentation. It's not purposeful. It's not like they're trying to be mean or they don't believe in your work. The part of the presentation that is for the expressive is the discussion part. Expressives have to output something. It's in the name, express. So if you give a 10-minute presentation or a 30-minute presentation, no matter like how refined, how perfect, how well-timed your presentation is, they will not be satisfied. If you're presenting to an expressive, you should limit the amount of time you talk in between when you have interaction with the audience. So we talked about in the driver episode, that first 2 to 3 minutes is for the driver. So when I do my opening, I talk about what I want to cover, what my key points are, and what the purpose of this meeting is. That's for the driver. If you have an expressive in the room, after you've done that 2 to 3 minutes, you should not continue. You should actually turn around and ask a question to the people in that room, or create a situation where you can have a back and forth. You can have a conversation. If I've presented for 2 to 3 minutes and then I stop and go, is there anything else that you guys want to cover in this meeting? Or is there anything that I need to be clear about before I move on? That's for the expressive. That's actually for the expressive and the amiable. But specifically, that expressive does not want to listen to you talk for 10 minutes. They actually need the back and forth. They need the interaction as a way to process the information that they're getting.
我觉得你刚刚讲的一点很重要，就是 and then this is something we kept talking about is that conversation becomes really important as a presentation, right? 那我觉得其实对 expressive 很重要的，那这个我们有讲过，就是当你要怎么样做 presentation opening, actually the best way for expressive is just going from small talk into presentation. That's probably the best way. 对我来讲，因为我觉得当你已经跟我做了一个简单的 small talk， 然后你找到了一个共同点，你找到了一个 connection， 然後你利用那个 connection 進入這個 presentation， that's the best way for me as an expressive。因為我覺得說，這個 presentation 是跟我有關係的。It has to be about like, what's it in for me? Like, I need to be part of the presentation.
So recently when working with companies, we've really pressed on this idea of conversation beats presentation. And back to, okay, I do need to present something. Let's take it where I'm meeting a new client. I need to present what my company does or the package. A lot of people's default is like, I have a tight 10 to 15 minute company and product introduction and I'm going to give it to them. If a driver or an expressive is in the room, you have already lost by bringing that mentality into that conversation. The other way that you can think about it is I start that presentation with some small talk and then I transition into the actual presentation. But after I have introduced maybe the key concepts, the key ideas behind my company or my product in that first 2 to 3 minutes, then I will stop and I'll ask a question about like, what do you guys want to learn more about? Right? Is there anything that I covered that is more interesting to you? And you let them give input. Because an expressive will give input, be like, oh, I'm really interested in this part of your company. Then your presentation jumps to that part of the company. And it feels a little bit more like choose your own adventure. But for the expressive, that's how they're thinking out loud. So what you really need to do is prepare like a less than 5-minute overview that highlights the key things to satisfy a driver, but then give an expressive a few options of what they want to learn more of, and then you stop and you ask a question, have them answer, and then you jump to that part of your presentation.
And I think with an expressive in a room, it's really important to know how to be flexible in the direction of your presentation. 就刚刚 Nick 有讲到，其实跟 expressive 做 presentation 的时候，你要随时要准备转变一个方向 right? You don't have like one set way to do this. 可能今天这个 expressive 他在乎的重点跟他上周讲的是不一样的。Maybe they care about something else completely different this week. They're going to ask you a completely different question. 那你这个时候就要准备好，那回答他的这个问题。And that is actually the most valuable thing about your presentation.
Now, this starts to lean into that question of, wait, so if I let an expressive just think out loud and that makes them happy, won't we just go forever in loops of different trains of thoughts? If you want to effectively communicate with an expressive, you need to find a balance between letting them have input, letting them speak, but also control an expressive. You need to have clear guidelines or clear deadlines about what needs to get done. That doesn't mean that, you just let them follow their thinking pattern for all time. But if you have thought very clearly about, okay, these are the things that need to be accomplished, then you can always bring them back to the main point. I understand that's a really interesting thought, but we do need to accomplish this by this date. And if you can give them those guidelines, then they'll do a lot better because they will get to give the input, but they also won't go flying off into space with completely different ideas.
所以这个也就是我们在如果今天是一个会议的安排会议流程，那你的 agenda 你是会议主持人 you gotta set a very clear meeting agenda and you stick with that, right? 那如果你今天是 host 那你就要随时准备 just you let the expressive talk but you need to steer them back to the direction that you're going, right? So that there's something that will be done so that we're not just like talking and talking forever.
Back to that original idea of how do I prepare a presentation or how do I prepare a meeting to handle an expressive is the thing that you need to be very clear about are those guidelines. Back to the scenario of presenting my company or product to a client. When I ask them, what do they want to know more about? That shouldn't be an extremely open-ended question. But if I have framed out the beginning of my presentation, be like, okay, some clients use our products to do A, some clients use it to do B, some clients use it to do C. Which of these paths make the most sense for your business? Then because they can choose one, I can keep them on that path. But if I just said, okay, my company is e-commerce selling this. What do you want to know more about? Now they have an infinite number of possibilities and it's very hard to get them back on track.
And I would say though, coming from an expressive, letting us speak in a presentation or in a meeting is really important, even if you don't really know this person, okay? So there are a lot of meetings out there. It's large meeting. It could be online. It could be physical. But if you don't really know a lot of people, but you kind of sense that this person kind of likes to talk, you give them opportunity to speak. And actually, as an expressive, if I feel like I tell my truth in a meeting, I'm happy. Like I can walk away and feel like, oh, 我今天做了一件事情. That's a productive meeting. And that's kind of a trick. You just have to know that 其实对 expressive 做简报开会的时候，其实你让他们能够适度的有说话的时间，其实他们都还蛮开心的。
So it is that balance of allowing the expressive to speak, but also having enough guidelines or enough talking points to keep them on topic. Expressives have a tendency to talk in generalities and big picture ideas. So if you want to narrow them down, then you have to have good interview or question asking skills to kind of narrow it down and get their thinking down to the point and then bring them back into the conversation.
And I think listening becomes really important because sometimes expressive would say, again, like we will say a lot of different things. We go off on a tangent from A to B, B to C. But if you can listen carefully, you will hear some keywords every now and then. 那其实我觉得帮我们点出这些 keyword， 就you mentioned this word a few times, or you mentioned this phrase a few times. Would you like to explain more? That's usually the key points that we try to get back to.
If you are an expressive, one of the things that you need to do for your growth action is to check with the rest of the group whether they're still with you or not. We talked about with Driver, one of the things they need to focus on is listening because they're very tell-oriented, they're very action-oriented. So they're usually just telling people what to do rather than asking. But with an expressive, it's similar, but because expressives are following their own train of thought, if they don't stop and check with the group whether the group actually understands where they are or what they're thinking, they will also not know whether the group followed your train of thought. And this is back to expressives like to use personal influence. But if an expressive has not checked, if the group is still with them, then that relationship or that influence will be gone because the group doesn't know what they're thinking anymore.
So 如果你今天是 expressive 的话，有时候你开会讲，你可能就会来 Okay, let's do a really quick recap. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. 那这个时候你可以请人家说would you like to rephrase what's been happening in the meeting? 然后你就可以确认大家的理解都是一样的。So I'm really glad 今天终于讲到我的这个个性。That's probably the most expressive thing to say.
Exactly.
I'm so happy that everyone talks about me today. Just joking. But 我希望大家能够透过今天这个单元更了解对 expressive 这种人，虽然他是非常热心，他也很喜欢去 inspire 别人，但是他又很容易去离题，或者他比较 emotional。你要怎么样能够 manage 这些情况，而且能够做更有效的沟通。
Be sure to join us next time for our last social style, the amiable, and seeing how it fits in with the rest of the group. As we've said on previous episodes, be sure to check out the downloadable handout so that you can follow along and see where people are on the scale. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production. Produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.